Well, welcome to the podcast Melody and Friends, where I will be taking a virtual tour around the world and interviewing all kinds of wonderful people. And today we land in Florida. I was a little confused whether I'm landing in Florida or Nashville to talk to Nate Larkin about his journey from pastor to his freedom from porn addiction. Welcome, Nate.
Oh, Melody, it's so good to hear your voice and see your face. And it's been a few years since we've had a chance to talk, and it's just wonderful to be with you again.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you, and it's always a treasure. I feel the same exact way of just gathering your story and sharing it to whomever it needs to go to breathe hope into the life of another.
Well, thanks, Melody.
Well, for those that don't know anything about Nate Larkin, let's just take a deep dive into your story with wherever you want to go. And then we could talk about your book and Samson Society and all the wonderful parts of it.
Yeah, it's I've been telling the story now publicly since, I guess, the book came out in 2007. Up until then, I had disclosed my story to a growing but still very small circle of trusted male friends that I was walking with. We'd started the Samson Society in 2004, but it had not gone public. I'd gotten my wife Allie's permission to tell my story in a book, and I think she had a little bit of wife's regret after she said, "Okay, go for it." And as you know, the wheels of publishing grind slowly. So it would be another 18 months or so before the book actually came out. And she had this growing sense of dread that now the world's going to know that Nate, who in our wonderful local church, I'd been describing myself in generic terms as an addict for a long time, but never disclosing the nature of my addiction. Part of it, and mainly because of all the stigma that's around porn addiction and sex addiction.
Yeah.
And Allie's desperation, her concern that, we'd lose all our friends and we'd lose, people would pull their children away from me, and, all kinds of horrible things would happen if I said those fateful words. So at any rate, so that was 2007. We're now 15 years on. I've been telling this story publicly for 15 years. And I got to tell you, I still treasure this story. I love it in all its ugly detail. I've come to see that this really is my greatest asset, not my greatest shame, because it makes Jesus look wonderful and it makes healing look possible. Yeah. So,
I could so relate, Nate. You said, you started sharing this in generic terms, and then you're writing about it. And I remember when my story came out, it was almost like my legs had been in the stirrups and all the pain of birthing a child. And it's like, you can't put it back in once it's out.
It's funny. We were waiting for the book to come out, and we were about 3 to 4 weeks from release, and I was invited to speak at our local church. And there were 1,000 people there or so on a Sunday morning. And Allie was just in agony, she couldn't sleep. And so impulsively, like halfway through the sermon, I decided just to put her out of her misery. I didn't tell her I was going to do it. I didn't plan to do it. And I just said, hey, there'll be a book coming out in another month or so. And so let me go ahead and tell you, I'm a recovering sex addict. I said the words, and I saw Allie just slump in her seat. She was sitting next to a couple of friends who immediately comforted her. But and here's the thing, she expected that once those fateful words were spoken, people would run.
Yeah.
And they did. They ran toward us. Suddenly, half the women in the room wanted to talk to Allie, it seemed like, right? And we were.
When you get honest, when you get that honest, people are like, oh my gosh, that's what I'm struggling with. I need to talk to Allie. She understands what I'm going through.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So anyway, the story I told in the book is one that the irony is that for all those years of secret struggling, I thought that I was unique. Since then, I've heard my story so often. I had one guy say, hey, I want a cut of the royalties on your book since you wrote my story. You know, I've heard so many men say, oh, yeah, that's me too. They identify with so many parts of the story. But I thought that I was just, the worst failure on the planet. Nobody was sinning or failing as badly as me. But I grew up in a Christian home. My dad was a pastor. I grew up in the holiness stream of the American evangelical Christian church. My dad was a Pentecostal preacher, so there was a big emphasis on right behavior, and also always the looming specter of hell. So we sang Amazing Grace. We believed in grace right up until you sinned. You had all the grace you needed until you needed it.
That's right.
And in our churches, we were swift to drop the hammer on anybody who was caught in or who was foolish enough to take our rhetoric about grace at face value and actually confessed some kind of a sexual transgression. Yeah. And, one of my great regrets is that in the years before I was forced to get honest and invited to get honest, thank God, about the nature of my struggle. I was always, I worked my way toward church leadership at an early age. I was marked out for leadership at an early age. And actually spent 5 years in the ministry. And even after I left the ministry in dismay and in despair over my inability to control my behavior and my absolute panic that one day I was going to be caught and exposed. Even during those years, when I was an active layman, always, and a sincere Christian. Here's the thing, a sincere Christian.
Yeah.
I actually participated in, the disciplining of men caught in sexual sin. If I wasn't throwing the rocks, I was holding the coats, somehow thinking that maybe I could put the fear of God in me. Maybe I would teach myself a lesson. I was so ashamed of my behavior. It was shame-based behavior, and I tried shame-based solutions. The accountability that I knew in those days was all shame-based. You don't want to do the behavior because you don't want to have to admit it. Because if you admit it, you'll be shamed.
And if you admit it, it's actually true.
That's right. Exactly. And I found that, my solution in those situations was just to start lying, which I, and then to further be separated from my real life, to live this crazy dual existence.
Yeah.
As somebody who I sincerely loved my wife the whole time, loved my kids, loved God. But I'll tell you what, when that switch flipped, and I do believe that all sexual acting out is really dissociative behavior.
Yeah.
When I dissociated, suddenly Allie wasn't there anymore. The kids didn't matter. God was gone. And it's astonishing to me the things I was capable of doing as an active addict. And I'll tell you what, the task of putting that back together to become an integrated person is something that none of us can do alone.
Right.
It requires courage, yes, but it also requires grace. It requires a ton of humility. And even if we succeed in getting there, there's no guarantee that the consequences of our behavior are going to disappear. I tell guys, one of my great joys these days in the Samson Society, we have a newcomer meeting every day for guys who are joining our online meetings. So I host a Saturday morning meeting, and typically guys don't come for help until all the crap has hit the fan and they're in distress, right?
Yep.
Right. And typically maybe half the guys,
maybe 1% out themselves, but 99.9.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Are always caught.
And here's the thing. Nowadays, one of the new additions to our website that our volunteer IT team has put together is they actually populate my screen as the host of the meeting with the email addresses, not the names, but the email addresses of the guys who have registered for the meeting. I noticed yesterday I had 6 guys, or Saturday, I had 6 guys in the newcomer meeting, but 12 guys had registered. That's pretty standard. 50% is actually a pretty good closing ratio because that window of willingness closes so quickly. The forces of denial are so strong that the minute a guy commits to going for help, a voice in the back of the head says, no, you can figure this out by yourself. You don't need to ask for help. You don't, and he'll find a reason not to freaking go to the meeting. And it's at any rate. So my story is
Nate, real quickly, did you get caught or did you confess? Did Allie find? I mean, what was your outing?
I was finally caught. Thank God, I was never arrested. Things could have really gone terribly for me. Oh man, I was 42 years old. We were 20 years into marriage. We had just made the move to Middle Tennessee. And it was a time of stress. We were running out of money. I was starting to get scared. I'd had a period of abstinence, which by the way, is pretty common for sincere guys struggling with this thing. I'd never gone for help, never done the deep work. And I managed to suck it up and white knuckle it for a while, but now the stresses were building. I didn't have anybody to tell, anybody to talk to, didn't know. And so I went back to the old medication and had slipped out of bed one night, gone after Allie had fallen asleep and gone back into my office to start downloading porn. And that was the night that she walked in on me. Now, truth be told, life was very miserable for Allie by that point. We porn addicts and sex addicts like to imagine that our behavior doesn't affect anybody else, but that is just simply not true. I had been bonding with virtual partners, and then because porn took me places I never intended to go, I'd been dragged across the flesh line. So initially I had used porn as kind of in my own mind, in my own rationalizing mind, as some kind of protection against infidelity. Right? I love my wife and I wasn't physically being an unfaithful wife, but I'm getting my sexual needs met without bothering her. And so I'm a good guy, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, porn is programming me with this continuing script. And eventually I am presented with a situation where there's a sexually available female and I don't see a person anymore. I see a body. And I'm following the script as it's been laid out. Right. So, of course, I never told Allie that. And my repentance, my regret, my sadness was sincere. And I would pour out my confession to God privately in church. Never, God forbid, tell anybody else.
If I can speak for Allie, or maybe you can speak for this.
Yeah.
A woman, whether a husband is looking at pornography, virtual infidelity, or physically, or even emotionally, like she feels married, but very alone.
Oh, well, that's the thing. Allie had seen me drift away from her emotionally, because that's what happened. You cannot attach to porn and attach to your spouse.
Right.
She lost her best friend.
Yeah.
So we both still love the kids, and yes, we were friends, but that intimacy and my ability to engage and connect and empathize. And also, I was bringing home a tremendous amount of self-hatred, which I turned on her.
Yep. Would you say contempt?
Yes. Oh, Allie has said, in the years that followed, she said, what was worse than your sexual infidelity? It was the condescending way you treated me during those years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. You're like, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
The self-contempt or others' contempt you feel it. You
right. Well, and it's hard. when I'm in a space where I'm not accepting responsibility for my own actions, I mean, I'm overwhelmed by them.
Yep.
I'm in a system where it's to be sinful is to be in eternal danger.
Right.
I can't look at my shadow. I can't admit my deeper motivations and my deeper fears. Yes. I always have to maintain that I have this, pure and selfless love for everybody, which is not true. I've never had a pure and loveless self for anybody. Thank God. God has a pure and selfless love for me. Yes. But my motives are always mixed. And if I'm not willing to look at my own shadow, those darker motivations, and own them, which I can only do under the safety of the gospel. If I can't do that, then I'll just project those onto other people. And now everybody else around me becomes guilty of the sin that I'm not willing to own.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. You're doing these things, but somehow you're a victim at the same time.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, the webs we weave.
Yep.
So there was a long time early in recovery. It took me a long time to get out of self-hatred, Melody.
What did that look like, Paul? I mean, what did that look like, Nate?
Let's face it, I did ugly things. And I failed in ugly ways. And it's okay for me, and it's good and right for me to hate that sin.
Yeah.
But you know what? I've learned to love my addict. And I've learned to love that poor, lost son of a bitch who was doing his best. Can I say son of a bitch? I don't know if I can say that, but
you can. Grace abound.
Right?
Yeah.
And what I'm grateful for is that my wife loves him too. That's the only reason we're married. And by the way, she was under no obligation. I often tell guys in the newcomer meetings who are, they're facing divorce proceedings, or the thing is just going sideways. Here's what we've learned in the Samson Society, which we'll get to eventually. It's a mutual aid society for Christian men, all of whom struggling with some kind of compulsive behavior, most of us behavior of a sexual nature. As I can tell guys, not every marriage survives, and not every marriage should, but every guy does. And hopefully every partner does. But it's amazing the wreckage. Yeah, at any rate, yeah. So yeah, mine spiraled from. So I actually did become. I followed the family destiny and became a pastor. I spent 5 years in the ministry. It was during my years in the ministry when I made that fateful. I crossed the line and hired my first. I paid money to my first prostitute in Fort Lauderdale, and when I couldn't stop that behavior, at the age of 30, I retired from the ministry in the age of 30, pleading burnout, just because I knew that I was going to get caught. I was going to be exposed, humiliated. That was the most unthinkable prospect that anybody else could ever know that I had done this. I had to either quit the behavior or quit the ministry. And at that point, there was only one I could quit. So I exited the ministry at age 30, went into business, and God graciously provided an avenue for me to learn a new skill, and I found my way into the strange field of forensic engineering. Within a couple of years, was a partner in an engineering firm, eminently unqualified for the job, but it did pay well. And for the next dozen years, while I was still acting out, I wasted enormous amounts of money, all the while hiding and lying, and things got really, really dark. But at the age of 42, Allie caught me, and that was the greatest. She saved my life. She freaking saved my life. She drew a line. She didn't immediately.
We refer to that as fierce love or feminine fury.
Yeah. All she said was, "I'm done." She said, "I'm not going to do this anymore." She did not say that she was going to divorce me. She reserved that as a right.
Right. Right.
But she was not going to pretend any longer.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, at that point, neither one of us had any reason to believe that I could change. She certainly believed I could change because I'd turned over so many leaves and made so many promises that I'd failed at. I'm just so grateful that at the time she caught me, we'd made a move from South Florida, where at that time there was almost nothing in the way of recovery help for sex addiction. We had moved by God's grace to Middle Tennessee, which at that point had become more or less the center of the universe for sex addiction recovery. And I found my way to a 12-step group where I got my first taste of the kind of humble, empathetic, kind honesty, safety. I found myself in the basement of a church in the middle of the week while all the good people were gone, sitting in a circle with a bunch of other messed up people.
Yeah.
Saying, with hearing honesty like I'd never heard. And then when I finally, after about the third meeting, found the courage to begin to say a little bit about how dark it had become for me and what I had done. People didn't pull away, they moved in.
Yeah.
And also they gave me a picture melody of a God I'd never met, even though I'd grown up in church. And I'm really grateful to recovery because it actually resuscitated a faith that had become pretty dead. Even though Allie and I continued in church, by the time I was 42, yes, we were going to church. And thank God we found our way into a church that really proclaimed, a gracious message. I was still just going through the motions. At that point, it seemed to me that either God didn't care or he didn't exist, because I had been begging him for years for a deliverance. That's what I wanted. Actually, it's what I said I wanted.
Yeah.
What I really wanted was moral self-sufficiency. I wanted to be able to live an upright and moral life without involving anybody else. That's what I wanted. And that's the one thing that God, in his, goodness and kindness, never would give me. That's not a good idea. I can't be the equal of God to be morally self-sufficient. And, what he really was pushing for was finally to get me to join the human race. Right?
Right.
Right.
What you were doing was so isolating, right?
Yes. I was always willing to give help, but never willing to ask for help. I never wanted to be just a man among men. I never wanted to be just another member of the body of Christ. Needy. One of the things we say in the Samson Society is that on any given day, every Christian needs help. And every Christian has some help to give.
That's right.
I'd grown up, trained to be the helper, the answer guy, the guy who had his shit together. That was supposed to be my job always, the answer man. Churches had hired me to be the answer man because that's typically why they hire a pastor. What
did that look like? What did the process of healing look like for you and for Allie?
Well, let me just say, I slept I slept in a closet for a couple of years. Seriously. I moved. Seriously, absolutely. An air mattress. We had a large walk-in closet.
Okay.
And I remember early on in this process, we were kind of maneuvering past each other in the kitchen, and I said something. I said, "Sweetie," and she wheeled on me and she said, "My name is not Sweetie." I don't know if you remember this, but I actually have a name. My name is Allie. My name is not Honey. My name is not Sweetie. My name is Allie. If you would like to address me from now on, I would appreciate it if you would use my name. Well, I think that was symptomatic of the way porn had conditioned me to objectify women. I had objectified my wife. She had been feeling less and less seen and heard. It was healing for her to start to hear her name. It was rough for me to learn how to talk to my wife by her name.
Yeah. Well, and as the wordsmith guy that you were, so many women are like, I don't want to hear words. I don't want to hear words. Just want to see actions.
Right.
Stop the words.
Stop the words. Right. So Allie was justifiably and actually, wisely skeptical of my recovery. And it was good reason, frankly, at that point. So we were living in Franklin, which is about 20 miles south of Nashville. At that point, there was one meeting in Franklin for sex addicts a week. That was a Saturday morning meeting, but I needed to go to daily meetings. And the only daily meetings were in Nashville. So I had to drive to Nashville every day to go to meetings. And my early recovery, I had such intellectual and spiritual arrogance. Mm-hmm. It's not like I just went and said, tell me what to do and I'll tell you the truth. I thought, I'd finally found the people who had the secret information, who knew the silver bullet, the final piece of the puzzle that would make it possible for me to defeat the compulsion. And so I'm a good student. I'm going to come in. I'm going to listen closely. I'm going to study their literature. I'm going to set the land speed record for recovery without ever having but from the edges. They want me to get a sponsor. Okay, I'll assign a sponsor, but he's going to be a sponsor in name because I'm essentially my own sponsor, and he's only going to hear what I'm going to tell him, right? So as a result, I was a champion slipper for the first 2 years. Mm. There were times when I would leave the house early to give myself time to stop at a massage parlor on the way to the meeting. Because I knew if I waited till after the meeting, I wouldn't go. Mm. Okay? Yep. I was a scared puppy and a sick puppy. And a proud puppy too. It's interesting that, when I went through the list of character defects with my first sponsor, he was pretty good at helping me. He zeroed in. He diagnosed. I had always been willing. I had this knack, this kind of aw shucks persona, because pride was a sin in the home that I grew up in. I learned what I thought was humility and what passed for humility, but what I learned was false modesty. Mm-hmm. Right?
Or sometimes, what I call that, Nate? I call it
what?
Vulnerability. F-A-U-S.
Vulnerability. Oh, I love that. What a great word.
It looks like, sounds like, I'm going to cry with you.
Yeah.
It's fake. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So I had learned false modesty. So I had thought like the one character defect that I'm obviously clear on, I got nothing to worry about is pride. And my first sponsor he just zeroed down and goes, I think that's the number one right there, dude. Mm. Number one, pride. And really it was really machismo. Its opposite side was fear.
Yeah.
So I've got to be bigger than life, because if you see who I really am, I'll lose status. You'll reject me. I'll be alone. Yeah. So Allie kept her distance for the first couple of years. She would slowly, bit by bit by bit. A lot of women have asked her, when did you start to think that maybe you could possibly trust this guy again? Mm-hmm. And she said it was when I stopped being so defensive. Mm-hmm. It was when we got to step 4 in the 12-step process, because I got started in 12-step recovery. And so we're doing a fearless moral inventory. And Allie and I had this very formal meeting on the front porch. And I said, hey, I'm working on this 4th step with my sponsor. And I have to come up with a list of character defects. Mm-hmm. And I've got to start on it, but I wonder if you can help.
Wow. That's humility.
Yeah. And she, very tentatively, because the pattern was I was so reactive. for 20 years. I was so reactive that if we were driving down the interstate, for example, and she would say, "That's your exit coming up," I would be offended. Because she is insinuating that I, in my omniscience, do not know that that's my exit coming up. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And when she would point out a failure of mine, because my ego was so brittle, I would immediately react defensively and often counterattack.
Yeah.
So I said, can you help me with the list of character defects? And she carefully and tentatively suggested one. And I went, "Oh, yeah, okay, thank you." And I wrote that down. "Can you expand on that?" And so she told me a little more and I wrote that down. I said, "Do you have another one?" Now I'm working hard at this. This is not easy, but I've kind of been coached a little bit on my sponsor because he's gotten on the whole pride thing. And I'm listening. She got quite enthusiastic about that project, by the way.
Here, give me the pad and the pen and let me get it down.
That's right. But the fact that I was able to do that,
yes,
started to change for her. It's like, well, maybe he is changing. Maybe. I will tell you this, Melody. I had zero hope when I started recovery that I was going to be able to stick to this because I've never stuck to anything.
Yeah.
I'm easily distracted. I'm impulsive, but I don't have a track record of sticking with things. I didn't stick with recovery. Recovery stuck with me. And I can't explain it. I really can't. I'm just grateful for it.
Yeah.
And I also must admit that I have at times resisted recovery. It's not like I have had no relapses in 22 years. It's not like I've had no relapses since the first two. There have been a few others. Thank God they have not been catastrophic. Thank God I've never had to go all the way into the ditch.
Yeah.
Thank God my wife is...
It's not even what you do, Nate. It's what you do after that is going to speak volumes to Allie.
That's the thing.
Your character is what you do after you screw up.
Right. Right. And thankfully, while Allie has been and remains and always will be my best friend, she is not my only friend. Right. And she is grateful for that.
Yeah.
She really feels like she's got a couple dozen brothers-in-law and actually about 6 core brothers-in-law who know me almost as well as she does, right?
So how did that happen? How did that happen, Nate? Because again, you can hide in recovery.
Yes,
right?
You can. Yeah.
So what did that look like for you? That had to be scary.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And it continues to be a little bit scary. We started the Samson Society in 2004. It's not a 12-step group, but it's a Christian group, a mutual aid society for Christian men.
Yeah.
I started it with a dozen guys who by that point I was walking with, not all of whom were struggling with compulsive sexual behavior, but all of whom respect the power of sex and have done at least something in their lives sexually that they're ashamed of. And all of whom know that there's something in their life that's bigger than they have. The one thing we all had in common when we started was we were all colossal failures as solo disciples. And had come to understand that the reason for that is that Jesus really doesn't have any solo disciples. That's not the plan. So he wants us to follow him together. That's the plan. So we decided to follow him together. Now that group, so we started in 2004. Today, Melody, there are 15,000 guys in the Samson Society.
So beautiful.
There are Samson meetings in 6 languages right now online. And among some of those guys who should know better, but they don't know better. They've just heard about me. They've heard me on a podcast. They've read a book. And so they imagine that I am some paragon of virtue for whom all the struggles are over, right? And I've got all my shit together, right?
Right.
I'm the hero. That's what they want to believe. It's the same danger that every pastor faces.
Yeah.
who's given the job of climbing up on a pedestal and staying there, right? Thankfully, the way the Samson Society is set up is we say, look, Christianity, properly understood, is a team sport, not an individual event. God's going to give you a team. There's going to be a lead guy on that team that you're going to be talking with daily, but there are going to be other guys with whom you're in regular contact. And ever since, since the dawn of the Samson Society, I have always had what we call a Silas. Although that's more a position than a person. So 6 guys have cycled through that position over time. And I have been Silas to quite a number of guys over the years. But I have daily conversations with other men in relationships that are equal. They're not, the one thing about the Samson Society is that we're not hierarchical in any way.
Right.
So one of the ways that I can serve the other guys I'm walking with, especially if I'm walking with a guy who's fairly new on the road to recovery, I got a choice. I can either be the answer man who always talks about his struggles in the past tense, right?
Yep.
Here's what I've found. That's fatal for me.
It's absolutely deadly. Yes.
Fatal. But I learned that the hard way. Fairly early in the Samson Society, there was a point where I was Silas to 16 guys. 4 more than Jesus, right? So I am, and I was the freaking answer man. And that ended with a face plant into a relapse. So now I limit myself 5 guys, 5 freaking guys. And
I like how you said this. I don't even know if you caught this, but you said equal. So co-equal. If you are in a relationship with all these guys and they are in a one down or they're in a relationship indebted to you, you will face plant again because you'll go back to the answer man.
I can't be the answer man. Okay. And so I disclose the way. So the best friend I can be to these guys that I'm friends with.
Yeah.
Is to model vulnerability, ask for help, listen as much as I talk.
Yeah.
And so I rely on these guys to help keep me between the lines. And Allie relies on my ongoing relationships with my brothers. Now, the deal that I have with Allie is I'm never going to burden her with some kind of confession she hasn't asked for. But she always will get an honest answer to a direct question. And we stay really current. But she doesn't feel like she's in charge of my sobriety or needs somehow to run it.
Nor does she need to. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
I don't know of a woman that really desires to be in that spot. It's
sure. And it's exhausting and it's anxiety ridden. Yeah, right. So she's relieved of that burden.
That's so good. But she has the freedom to come ask you a question.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And there are times when she'll see me starting to ask a little squirrely, and she'll go, "Hey, did you call your Silas today?"
How do you receive that?
Yeah, usually pretty good. I love that, actually.
Yeah.
So, I was terrified of being seen as inadequate. I guess that's probably my greatest fear. The fear of being seen as inadequate. Although it's not nearly as scary as it used to be. What I've come to find out is that if I would just admit my inadequacy, I get really what I'm looking for if I'm in the right company. What I'm really getting is I'm getting connection and I'm getting help and I'm getting empathy.
Yeah.
I do believe that, suddenly his name has evaded me. Whoever it was who said the opposite of addiction is connection. I absolutely believe that's the truth. And that's what I was looking for all those years. when I was paying for some facsimile of intimacy.
Mhm.
Uh, I was looking for connection. And now here's what I've learned. Well, I guess what's great about our relationship these days, we're aging. I'm 65 now, and I married the original cougar. So Allie is 75. She's 10 years my senior. Um, you know, we're not the sexual athletes we imagined ourselves to be at one point. Life has really settled down.
Mm.
Um,
Rich with grandkids and all the things.
oh, yeah. Um, I startled myself by saying sexual athletes, and then I completely lost my train of thought. I was going to make a point, Melody, and I have no idea what it was.
It's the beauty. It's the beauty of our age, right? I mean,
that's right. Yeah. I don't know. It's.
But you said that you were 65 and Allie was 75, 10 years older than you, and you're not the sexual athletes that you were anymore.
Right. Yeah. I guess I don't know where I was going, but here's the thing: we have a deep connection. I'm so grateful that a marriage that should not have survived by rights. God, if our marriage had not survived, God would have taken care of Allie. God would have taken care of me. But for reasons of his own, he has poured out his grace on us, and Allie has been able to forgive what no woman should ever have be asked to forgive.
Yeah.
I have learned the beauty of non-sexual intimacy, and I learned it in recovery.
Yeah, absolutely.
During my years as an active addict and really programmed by the culture, when somebody asked me, have you been intimate with your wife? I interpreted that as, have you had sex with your wife?
Right.
What else? Right. That's what intimacy is, sex. Oh, I have learned that. And why did it take me this long to recognize? It's very possible to have sex without intimacy.
Right.
I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on bad sex without intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also possible to have intimacy without sex, which is very deeply satisfying. And it's possible, under the right circumstances, to have intimacy with sex. Yes. And that blows the doors off anything I ever paid for.
Right. Absolutely.
But I don't need that anymore.
Right.
For years, I thought that sex was a fundamental human need, as essential to my happiness, to my survival, as air and water. Mm-hmm. More important than food or sleep. I would give up food and sleep for the pursuit of illicit sex. Mm-hmm. Now I know that sex is a gift to be enjoyed at certain times by certain people under certain circumstances. But it's wonderful, but it is not a fundamental human need. And it is possible to live a very happy, contented, fulfilled, enjoyable life, even during a season, even an extended season, without sex. Mm-hmm. I think
you're seen, and when you are known by another, and
yes,
you even get touched, not even sexual touch, but when you get to experience all those things, I mean, that is what God talks about Yahweh Yada, to be known.
Yeah.
Fully, and that's what we all long for.
One of the things I've learned from my friends in recovery is my guy friends. I learned how to hug. I freaking didn't know how to hug. Of course, I never got a hug from my dad. I got the side hug, the slap thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that was about.
Right.
But I've learned to hug in ways that are not at all sexual.
Right.
But it meets that, and I don't hug women that way, by the way. Yeah. But I've learned to give my brothers a hug at appropriate times in a way that's healing to both of us.
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So beautiful. So talk a little bit more, I guess, about your book in Samson Society. there are so many people, and I love how this is not in one space. It's not just in Nashville or not just in Florida, but everywhere, online and offline.
Yeah. So Samson Society, which began with that group of a dozen guys in Franklin, Tennessee, we put out a book in 2007 called Samson and the Pirate Monks. That's the title of the book. Yeah. Where I told my story and some of the other guys told theirs, and then we described Samson, hoping we could inspire some other guys to do something like what we were doing. Since then, more than 500 local groups have started around the world. About a year before the pandemic hit, we made the jump to online meetings, which I resisted initially, because if there's one thing I know for sure, it is that recovery requires relationship.
That's right.
And as an old guy, I didn't think that relationships can form outside of a shared physical space. Mm-hmm. Until some of the younger guys introduced me to this crazy thing called Zoom, and I sat in my first virtual meeting. So our goal, by the way, is to have at least one virtual meeting every hour of every day.
Wow.
So that no matter where a guy is in the world or where he is in his life, brothers are always just a click away. We're still a good distance, but man, we have made some progress.
That's awesome.
In the last couple of years. So all those meetings hosted by volunteers, meetings now in 6 languages. Samson was finally translated for the first time into another language. It was translated this last year into Italian. Samson has taken off in Italy. In fact, we have our international retreat. Actually, 2 retreats this year will be held in Italy, the 1st and 2nd weeks of October. Mm-hmm. But meanwhile, I have to keep to the fundamentals.
Right.
I have to focus on my daily connection with my guys. Yes, I can share the story, and it's good for me to share the story. But now my voice is just one among hundreds, thousands, I guess, of guys who have an experience that in some way is similar to mine, but bears all the beauty of their own specific story. And I love to see recovery grow. I love to see it grow in concert with the gospel. In fact, I don't think recovery is possible without the loving care of a higher power. Mm-hmm. And so I'm grateful. I really am.
Well, and to me, I think it's really neat, Nate, when we see Jesus, he always met a felt need for gospel opportunities, and the recovery allows the safety and the sacred space to be seen and known and heard and validated. Such a ripe opportunity and space for the gospel. So we find that a lot of people will find recovery, and then, I remember a girl one time emailed me and she said, I'm struggling with betrayal by my partner, but I'm not really interested in Christianity. She was a Buddhist. And it was fascinating. And I said, well, we're connecting, we're connecting in this space together. It doesn't matter what you are. And now she's a Methodist minister.
I love it.
It's just so beautiful. Yeah.
I also think, Melody, this may be a bit of a tangent, but I think we need to, what I'm telling my brothers in the Samson Society these days, the guys at Samson House, which is the nonprofit we started a few years ago to support the growth and health of the Samson Societies, I think we do need to start broadening the conversation a little bit. And it also might help to reduce a bit of the stigma. I think rather than talking so much about porn addiction or sex addiction, porn addiction especially, it would be good for us to begin talking in broader terms about technology addiction.
Amen.
Because nowadays, I'll tell you what, I'm seeing more and more younger guys come into the Samson Society. I'm amazed at how many of those guys have stepped away from education, from career, from relationship, from marriage over something like gaming.
Yep.
And gaming.
Or just even Facebook and Instagram, just getting the likes all the time. You're behind this curtain and you feel
social media. Yep. So gaming has merged in many ways with porn. Social media has merged with porn.
Right.
In fact, I think we can, I've seen some very highly productive guys who walked away from their family and from their wives and from real connection because they've got hooked on productivity tools. They can't stay away from their email for more than 2 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So what that all does in common, it takes us out of real experience in real life, in real connection with real people for virtual engagement.
Yep. Which we know is not real.
Is not real engagement.
Right.
And it does not meet that deepest need of the human heart. And so it leads to desperation. So we're going to be talking more and more in Samson about technology addiction, of which porn addiction certainly is a subset.
Right.
And porn addiction can lead to all kinds of behavior. And we're never going to forsake talking about that. But I think as this problem continues to metastasize, we need to broaden the conversation.
I agree. 100%. Yep. Well, tell our listeners how to get in touch with you.
Sure.
I'll put all the links in the show notes and everything like that, but go on and tell everybody how to get in touch with Nate Larkin.
All right. Well, the Samson Society, by the way, is for guys only, but one of the greatest developments in the last couple of years is the birth of the Sarah Society, which started spontaneously by the wives of virtual Samson guys.
Okay.
More than 500 women now in the Sarah Society, sarahsociety.com. I'll get you those meetings. And they're having their first retreat by the time it'll be over by the time this airs probably, but there'll be annual retreats. And we have some of the top leaders in the field of betrayal trauma leading the retreat for the Sarah Society. So women who want help. So we have the Sarah Society at sarahsociety.com. For guys, we have samsonsociety.com or .org. And you can always get me at Nate at Samson House. There's no P in Samson, by the way. Some people just want to put a P in there, but it's not SAMSON. Nate at samsonhouse.org. You can get me or find me on Facebook or whatever. And if there's any way I can help, I'm happy to do it.
Well, I'm excited about hearing more about the Sarah Society as well and connecting the women in our organization to that, because I think that daily connection is a huge piece of it. When you're
they're doing the same thing daily. They're trying to do regular online meetings, and for those women who are in therapy, this is wonderful support between sessions.
Yes, amen. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your schedule and your daily life to just sit down with me today and just share your story. It's so redeeming to hear, and love to see you and Allie and on Facebook and the things. But excited.
Well, I've enjoyed it, Melody. So good to see your face and hear your voice. And thank you for stepping up and working on building this podcast. It is so desperately needed.
This episode has been brought to you by Life Beyond Betrayal. Life Beyond Betrayal is a comprehensive program that provides a community as well as 3 courses for women. The first course is Surviving Trauma Beyond Betrayal. Our second course is called Grieving Beyond Betrayal. And the third course is called Reclaiming You Beyond Betrayal. This is a self-paced program that you can take as long as you want to go through, and also provides a community so you feel like you have the support that you need. So check out Life Beyond Betrayal membership at lifebeyondbetrayal.com.